In regards improvisation, music therapist Evan Root states, improvisation may be understood to create a situation where change, transformation, and process come into focus. In this sense, improvisation not only means to get from one place to another, but from one state to another. In this sense, improvisation is a transitional ritual, a way of changing position, frames, status, or states of consciousness. Root says, when shared with others, this experience has the potential to lead to what he describes as communitas, one soul connecting with another. He says this experience requires giving yourself totally, and attitudes like egoisms, possessive feelings, and the spirit of competition have to give way to generosity, closeness, and communion. This experience finds parallel in other forms of artistic practice, for instance, in abstract expressionism or stream of consciousness writing, practices which to a certain extent break down form, the formal communicative language of that medium. This would similarly seem to be the core of the aesthetic attitude, where the underlying dispositions are those of disinterested attentiveness or will-less contemplation. Philosopher Schopenhauer states, when, however, an external cause or inward disposition suddenly raises us out of the endless stream of willing and snatches knowledge from the thraldom of the will, the attention is no longer directed to the motives of willing, but comprehends things free from their relation to the will. Then all at once the peace, always sought, but always escaping us, comes to us of its own accord, and all is well with us. This attentive state also shares parallel with experiences in flow, a pleasurable state of consciousness that can be accessed through total involvement in an activity. Author and psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi says flow can be achieved through many different activities, but the criterion for its achievement is total attentiveness. Theologian Henry Nouwen says the transcendent or ecstatic moment is precisely the moment when a person loses their self-preoccupation and is drawn out of their self into a new reality. He points out the word ecstasy comes from the Greek ekstasis, which is derived from ek, meaning out, and stasis, a state of standstill. This activity of losing self-preoccupation relates similarly to contemplative practice, where the aim is to focus away from self, to become present with God in an attitude of attentive and focused listening. A practice that involves quieting the inner dialogue, the endless chatter of the mind. This activity of attentive communion, of intuitive receptivity, would seem a desirable state from which to develop and create art. Philosopher Martin Buber speaks of thou saying, being fully present. He says all genuine art making involves this attentive practice, this state of fully receptive presence. Painter and teacher Robert Henry writes, "We make our discoveries of technique while in the state, because then we are clear-sighted." Scholar and cultural critic Lewis Hyde presents this listening receptive state to be the inspired state where the artist has a sense of being a receiver, a recipient, rather than a creator. According to Hyde, within this gifted state, an artist experiences the work coming through them, rather than being consciously constructed by them. He writes, "An essential portion of any artist's labour is not creation as much as invocation. Part of the work must not be made, it must be received." Hyde states this activity does not take place in the rational mind, but rather in intuition. He writes, "We participate in the esemplastic power of a gift by way of a particular kind of unconsciousness, unanalytic, undialectical consciousness."
Then thy thought much strong insanity of the nail flying through. Then sigh in life inside my conscious body over. Then I secure that all means nameless bodies
Ba, go, a, fle, ha, tu, tem, sen, flo, di, ca, re, bo, shi, ha, no, de, an, gi, a, re, ha, si, vlo, gi, ni, a, shi, vi, ha, ti, la, di, a, chi, ga, bra, de, fo, na, ba. Through contemplative practice, it is often possible to understand concepts or to know situations through an expanded perspective. Once, whilst practicing contemplation, I had a sense of stepping forward onto word sounds, nebulous shapes of sounds that appeared beneath my feet as stepping stones, leading out across the void. This experience reminded me of similar states within musical improvisation, where I would have a sense of being a passenger rather than a creator, of following the sounds.
Ha, he, ha, ho, he, ho, ha, ho, he, ho, ha, he, hu, ha, ho, ha, he, ha, he, ha, ho, ha, ho, ha.
These experiences caused me to reflect on the role of language, the way words, whilst powerful in shaping and constructing perceptions of reality, also impose limitations, creating dualities and distinctions. Through dismantling language, it seemed temporarily possible to transcend these constraints, facilitating access to alternative ways of experiencing and knowing. It is also a well-documented characteristic within contemplation, improvisation, and flow states that time can be experienced differently, where a person might experience a heightened consciousness of the eternal and the temporal simultaneously, of chronos, clock time, embedded within eternal time, within kairos. In his book, Improvisation, Creativity and Consciousness, Edward Sareth writes, "In heightened or transcendent states, two kinds of time perception are possible. One is a linear, sequential flow of discrete now or present moments, similar to that accessed in ordinary consciousness. The other is an overarching sense of an eternal present, where past and future connections are subordinate." Amanahane Omayona. Amanahane Omayona. Amanahane Yona Hona. Amanahane Yona Hona. Amanahane Yomayona. Amanahaye Yomahiya. Amanahaye Yomahiye. Amanahane Yomahoya. Amanahaye Yomanoha. Amanahaye Yonahona. There is something about creating from a position of kairos, of flow, that releases the artist to be a passenger in this process in a way that is energizing. This relates to the idea of art making as play. Kurt Simonson, assistant professor at Biola University, writes, "In kairos we are completely unself-conscious, and yet paradoxically far more real than we can ever be when we're constantly checking our watches for chronological time." The saint in contemplation, lost to self in the mind of God, is in kairos. The artist at work is in kairos. The child at play, totally thrown outside herself in the game, is in kairos. Kurt states, in kairos we become what we are called to be as human beings, co-creators with God, touching on the wonder of creation. To create from flow, from kairos, to weave this state into a piece of work, can be a kind of sharing of the kairos state, an encounter which for the recipient might perpetuate a desire for or offer a glimpse of transcendence. It could be that these experiences point beyond themselves. From a biblical perspective, that they offer a foretaste, a glimpse toward the coming kingdom. This notion relates to art's eschatological function. Art that acts as pointer toward the coming transfiguration of the cosmos. Theologian Patrick Sherry states, "The arts in their highest achievements glimpse eternal beauty and anticipate and give a foretaste of the reality beyond which is to come. A foretaste of the coming transfiguration of the cosmos, where the temporal extension of this world will be transcended in the co-presence of all time in eternity." Ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus states, "Time is a game played beautifully by children."